All right, we're in. Let's start guide video number 10. 10 fingers. Um, we're going to do a story order. Let's start this one off a little bit more fun with a dad joke, my friends. My family and I went on a ski trip last week. It started off great. It was just all downhill from there. Ah, dad joke. All right, let's get into the story order here. So we're level 14 mechanic. We have $22,137. Um, Before we read this, let's go just refresh where our mechanic is and where our shop's at. So we have all the way up to Lucky in the fourth, uh, fifth skill tree here, which gives us a 25% chance of getting a mysterious mystery case after finishing any order. The story orders, you automatically get a case. We have 1, 2, and 3 points into fixing parts, so we can fix up to group 3 parts. We're saving up to get the rest. We have a couple of points into strong arms and fast hands. That's where we're at as far as our skill of our mechanic. Garage expansion wise, we have the garage expansion paid for. We have paint shop level 1, which we needed for our last story order. We purchased the car wash. We have all the diagnostic tools. We have not yet bought the brake lathe. I think we're going to go ahead and get the brake lathe. All right, so we have a brake lathe now. So there we go. First thing we bought. The engine stand and the engine harness, I really enjoy using this. It makes working on engines so much more fun because you can just pop the engine out. Um, Especially as you're doing full restorations, that's very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and get the engine tools. The tint kit, honestly, it's only 200 bucks. Let's just go ahead and get the tint kit. We're not tinting windows. It's not, as I recall, any part of the story orders, but it's 200 bucks. So we have all the tools in our workshop now that we need. The test path. For aligning wheels, we're going to need to get a test path. I'm pretty sure if I recall, there is a story card that requires us to align the wheels. So that's going to be one that we're probably going to end up having to invest in here fairly soon, is getting the uh, test path, which gives you the ability to line up the wheels. Um, you can also align the headlights, and you can do tests on the brakes and some cursory tests on the suspension. So it's good stuff. Salvaging, that's for later as you're going to restore your own cars. That's useful, but not something we need. The warehouse is just another place to store cars. Honestly, I'm just going to store all our parts on this guide videos um, uh, on the mechanic himself. The dyno is for tuning your own car, testing it. That's a big investment, but we don't need to deal with that now. All right, so that kind of refreshes our mechanic and where we're at. So let's go back and look at the story order. So we have a 1995 Bolt Cargo, which is a GMC van. Hi, my sister recommended your workshop. Truth be told, when I learned the location, I couldn't believe that there was anything standing here at all because we have a shop in the middle of the desert. And yet here you are, a great garage. Back to the car. I'm coming in with my truck. I use it every day at work. It's a bit worn out, um, but it's not missing anything. Apart from the engine's crackling and a drop in power, I don't see any major problems. But maybe it's a matter of habit. Please take a closer look at the suspension. The car is often carrying some loads. Do a routine checkup. Make sure it's usable for a few more years, and thanks. Let's see here. Change and drain the oil, which we've done that on all the story cars, so that's there. And then other tasks. We'll see what we have here. So let's go ahead and take the order. Well, it is a rusty, dirty piece of junk. So that's where that van is at. Let's check on the order. So we have 8 parts, or 8 pages of parts that are broke on this thing. Sorry about the stream freezing up. Hopefully that clears up here soon. At least on my Steam Twitch Studio app over here, it hasn't shown any drop frames yet, so hopefully that'll pick back up quick. Change and drain the oil. We've done that in all our other guide videos, so that's old news. Change brake fluid, coolant, power steering, and refill some windshield washer fluid. All right, so this is easy. Just because I can't stand looking at this, and this is old hat of back when I worked in my dad's shop when I was a kid. Every car that came into the shop got washed. So I'm washing that sumbug just so that it looks better. All right, so that's where we'll start. Let's go ahead and just throw some washer fluid in. We'll get one thing done. All right, washer fluid's done. And then let's do some diagnostics on this bad boy. We'll start with the onboard diagnostic scanner. Did I not click it? Oh, it doesn't have an OBD port because it's an older car. Jeez. There we go. Compression test, it can't be started. Well, that's our first problem. All right. So we can't even check on compression. I can look at these numbers on the electronic multimeter. Most of those were in the 50s, 60s, 54, 53. Those are the actual numbers of the parts we're testing. So we have a bad alternator and a bad starter. So those two parts we know we're going to be replacing. There's the alternator right there. The starter sits down on the back side, goes into the flywheel on the back side of the transmission. So that's where that's at. All right, so we know the starter's bad. Let's check the fuel system. Can't be started, so we can't test that yet. And we'll check the tire tread. 54%, 53, 58, and 61. So the tires are reasonable. All right, so let's move this car to car lifter A. And I think the first thing we're going to do, let's just fix the starter and the alternator. That way we can try to start this car and do some other diagnostics on it. So first thing to look at, we got to get that belt off. So we're going to have to pull the fan first. Let's pull the fan. All right, the fan is pulled. Pull this pulley because it's outside the belt, then we can take the belt. Okay, and we'll take the alternator. Got a rusted bolt, little WD-40. Another rusted bolt, little WD-40 fixes all. And then the starter, probably we're going to have to be under the car to get the starter. Nope, we can take it. Awesome. All right, so we need a starter, an alternator. Hey, and that serpentine belt was bad. Let's replace that too. And just to be sure, those are three parts that are right there on the car that are screwed up. So we'll go to our tablet, electronics, starter for a V8, an alternator for an inline 6B, and a serpentine belt, which is not at this shop. Nope, it's at this shop. All right, so we got the belt. Let's go ahead and mount up the starter. And then I'm going to pop over to the front of the engine. Put that alternator on. Nice new alternator. Put on, oops, I clicked too far there. Put on serpentine belt. That idler roller. And I'm going to replace on the fan. And I believe we're going to be to a spot we can test the car now. All right, so those parts are done. Let's go to our, or I'm not in the engine, am I? Diagnostic tools, and see if we can do a compression test now. We can. All right, so it's already reading low compression. We're at 4 bars, so this ain't good. We're probably gonna have to do some engine work. Oh, we have some engine work to do, friends. Holy cow. So we got piston rings, rocker arms, pistons with connecting rod. Pretty much all the rings are shot. So it's good that we went ahead and bought that engine mount and the engine picker, because I think we're going to pull this engine, so that'll be fun. Let's do a fuel system test as well. Fuel filter and a fuel pump are bad. Okay. Well, let's pop out of here. Let's go to examine mode. We know we got a bad fuel filter. Fuel pump is bad back there. Let's go ahead and just test or put the mechanics peepers on the rest of these and test the suspension system just by examining. Examine the cross member. Okay, so we have some suspension work, it looks like, too. Okay, so that sway bar in the front is bad. Let's check the exhaust. That exhaust looks fine. This exhaust looks okay. How's the drive shaft? She's fine. How's that rear cross member? It's okay. Let's check the suspension on the back right. As much as we can check the suspension. Okay, so we have some bad U-bolts. Oh, we have a bad leaf spring as well. So this van is in just horrendous shape. So we have suspension work, engine work, and we have a lot of stuff. There's still some more engine parts that we can examine above and beyond our diagnostic tools. So we're going to go ahead and just keep examining until the mechanic doesn't examine any further. This just helps identify which parts you know are going to be screwed up. All right. Check that. Can I look at the radiator? Can. All right, so we have identified most of the parts on this vehicle. So we know, go to normal mode, car status. And there's still a good amount of parts we have yet to identify, but there's also, if you go to your examine mode, you can see which parts you have yet to identify. So honestly, you could just pull those parts, check their percentages, and then you'll know which parts are going to be parts you're going to have to address. So the first thing, let's pop this bad boy up in the air. I'm going to grab my engine draining tool, move this to the bolt, let's drain the oil, move that back. Then I'm going to grab my cherry picker, which is the engine pulling tool, move that to the bolt. I know I'm going to be pulling this engine because the engine's bad. The fuel pump I know here is bad, so I'm just going to get a new fuel pump real quick. Alright, put that in. So the fuel system other than the fuel filter is okay. Alright, let's drop the trans out of this thing. So to pull an engine, you have to remove the transmission first. So there's a few things you have to take out to take the transmission. Pull out the starter, because that goes into the transmission. Pull the drive shaft. There's 4 bolts at the front of the drive shaft. Okay, got 4 bolts, and then there's 4 bolts at the rear. Okay, the drive shaft is off. Then you can click on the transmission, and let's pull the trans. Okay, and we're probably going to have to pull these exhaust pieces out so that they're just not connected to the engine. Now we can drop the van out of the air, and we can pull the engine. Remove front exhaust pipe, overhead valve. Okay. Did I not remove the front exhaust pipe? I thought I had. Well, let's check. Front exhaust pipe, overhead valve. You have to remove both of those front exhaust pieces before you pull the engine. That's okay. It's fine. Now we pulled the motor out. So the motor is now in your mechanic's hands, and he has wicked strong strength and is able to bring it over here to our engine stand, and you just select the engine stand. You left click on it, hit install engine on stand, and then it'll be the engine that we just pulled. So now we can work on the engine stand, which is it's just easier, honestly. So we know we have to take the pistons off. So let's start by clicking into the motor. Let's rotate it. And I'm going to pull the oil pan out of the bottom. Take the oil filter off. Hey, and we just leveled. Which actually, since we just leveled, let's just check to see if we got enough skill points to buy Renovator 4. We do. All right. This will be 5 skill points, so we still have to hold out for that. That's fine. So we can probably repair some of these parts that we're going to be pulling if they're in not terrible condition. Parts that are above 10% you can repair. Take the fan. All right, so let's get in here. If you were ever curious, can we go to examine mode? No, we can't. But you can kind of see these crankshaft bearings, they're bad. Which weren't on our initial part list. Before I pull too many parts, let's pull this clutch bearing or clutch pressure plate first. Let's sort by condition. The alternator we already took care of, so I'm just going to sell it. The starter we took care of, sell it. Serpentine belt we took care of, sell it. And the fuel pump we took care of. Alright, the rest of these parts we'll just leave in the inventory. The reason I'm doing that is that as we're pulling parts here, I want to be able to identify which parts I'm going to be readdressing. And basically all the rings were bad. There might have been one ring that was good. So we're just going to re-ring the whole thing. That way I don't have to remember which... Hey bud, how are you? I don't have to remember which piston number had the bad ring. There we go. Let's take the rod caps off first. Rusted bolt. There we go. Let's rotate the engine, and we'll take the top parts off. Get the air filter and air filter cover off. Pull the carb. Especially when an engine is this screwed up that you have to repair. That's why I like pulling the engine, so that you can just tear the whole engine down and then rebuild it. Doing it in the engine bay, you can. It's just a little bit harder to see the parts easily. The ignition system, the fuel filter, head cover. Don't forget to hit your WD-40 on your rusty parts. Pull that. Some bad spark plugs. You can see that just by looking at them. But we already know that because we did our diagnostic tests before. These rockers, some of them look bad. All right, let's just pull the rockers first. Then we'll get the push rods. Rusted bolt. If you can't see the bolt, and as you're going to remove it, you hear that sound, you know it's rusted. All right, so that's out. Let's pull the push rods. This is going to net us a lot of experience on this thing doing a full engine rebuild. All right, so that's out. Let's take the intake off. Four bolts on the other side. Then we can pull the head. There's 4 bolts on this one, or three. There we go. Then we can pull the pistons. Okay, that side's done. Take the exhaust manifold off on this side. Grab the spark plugs. Engine head cover. And we'll get the rockers out. All right, the rockers are out. We'll get those push rods. And then let's pull the head. There's one rusted bolt there. All right, the head is out. And then I'll pull these pistons. Alright, so that's basically done. I don't recall if the water pump or the timing was an issue. I mean, we already have it broken down this far. Let's just go ahead and tear the rest of it out and just check on the timing system. Just to be on the safe side. I'd hate to have tore this car this far apart and not address that. So, just to be safe. Let's go ahead and pull the timing cover, check the timing chain. Hit the water pump. Well, get that. Now I can get the water pump. Well, maybe I will. Timing cover, and heck, yeah, that cam gear looks terrible. So we did have to pull this. And was the camshaft okay? I think it was, but you know, we pulled everything else. Just pull the whole dang thing. There we go. And we'll just leave the block sitting on the engine stand, because as I recall, that was fine. Now the way to check which parts your customer wants to repair, go back to your van or any car, look at our parts list. So we know we have the air filter, clutch plate, crankshaft is bad. The crankshaft bearing caps, I told you those were bad. The fuel filter, okay. And we still have some parts we have not, that timing chain was bad. Cam gear was bad. There's still some parts that have not been discovered. I'm pretty sure that's going to be in suspension. There won't be any other engine parts we have not yet looked at, so we're covered on there. Oh, I just wanted to check. Was the engine block listed as a part they wanted fixed? It wasn't. Good. All right. So now we have our list of parts. I'm going to sort it by condition from crappy to the top there, right? And all of these are bad. There are some here that are in the yellow. I don't think there's any parts here that we'd want to repair. Hey, here we go. Crankshaft bearing cap. That's one that we actually have to fix. So let's just go ahead and repair it instead of buying a new one. So the way the minigame works, stop in the green and you have a chance of fixing it. There we go. That's done. Rod caps. I think those were listed as fine. The engine head. The rest of this are parts that we don't have to replace. Now we could repair them for the guy if we wanted to, but just to check our parts list here, were rod caps listed? Nope. Oh, there's some listed here. Four rod caps are bad, and I have some that are in the yellow. You'd have to remember which order they were in. So the ones that I have that are good, I'm just going to repair. Costs us a couple of bucks, but then I don't have to go back in my head and try to remember which slot the ones that were 58% and are okay to keep were at. We'll just put all 100% rod caps in. And hey, we're a nice mechanic, so you're going to get a car back in better condition than what you had even planned for, right? All right, the rest of this we could repair, but we do not need to repair. All right. So now we have a good list here of the parts that we need to purchase. So how are we going to purchase this? Piston rings, we're buying 8. I think there's some piston rings. Let me just explain here. So all the rings were bad. Okay. I thought there were some that were yellow. There isn't. So it moots my point. All right. To add these parts, right click. Adds to your shopping list. And there is a lot of broken parts in this engine. No wonder she was having bad power. All right, so that's the part list that we have to shop for. So then we'll pull up our shop. Spark plugs are not here. Piston rings are. We need 8. Rocker arms. Now here's an issue. Our rocker arms, we have some that are 54%. Where can we repair rocker arms? We can't. So it's the same issue as like pulling spark plugs on those previous story orders. If you replace a rocker arm on, let's say, cylinder 1 that was 54% and you didn't have to repair it, you put your 100% one there, you put your 54% one on piston 2 was the one that you were supposed to repair, it won't satisfy the order. So what I'm planning on doing here, there's 2 rocker arms per cylinder. We have an 8-cylinder engine. I'm just going to buy 16 rocker arms. That's the point of that whole story. It costs 15 bucks, so we're probably buying more than what we need to, but it'll just save you a headache. Trust me on this. 16 rocker arms. Same for the push rods. We're not going to keep the yellow push rods. We're going to replace them all. There's 2 per cylinder, so you need 16. 16 push rods. Crankshaft bearing cap, we only have to buy 2. The others we were able to repair. New oil filter. We need 4 more rod caps. We repaired the other 4. We need 3 pistons. Now here's another issue. It's the same issue that if we use these old pistons and place them in the wrong piston slot, because I didn't write down which slot they were in, if I had remembered, I should have done that, because pistons are a little bit pricier. But honestly, they're 80 bucks. I'm just going to replace all 8 pistons so I don't have to remember. It's probably an overpay, but we have a little extra money right now, so we're fine. Let's get the timing chain. Ignition distributor cap is not at this store. Fuel cap filter is. Clutch plate. Air filter. Ignition wires not at this store. Cam gear is. Crankshaft is. And then the ignition distributor is not at this shop. So go to the electronics shop and get the last parts that we need. Again, I didn't write down which spark plugs were bad. We're going to buy 8. Ignition distributor cap, ignition wires, and distributor rotor. And then if we go to our inventory, let's just sell all the parts that are below 30%, which got rid of all the red parts basically. Let's save the game so we don't forget. And let's rotate the engine. I like working underneath the engine first. And go to part mount. Put on the crankshaft. Let's put our pistons in. And rings. So just like doing a brake job where you have a brake caliper, then you have to select the brake master cylinder. Just select piston with connecting rod and a new piston ring. We sold the old piston ring, so we wouldn't even have the opportunity to select the wrong ring. I'll put in the 100% pistons in each spot. Those old pistons we could have used, but again, I didn't write down which spot they were in, so we kind of were overpaying on this job a bit. But honestly, if you get this part far into a rebuild as a a real consumer, you're not going to replace one piston. You just replace them as a set. Put on the rod caps, cam bearings, or crankshaft bearings in between. Bearing cap. Rod cap. And a rod cap. Alright, now we can put the oil pan on. And basically underneath the car, or underneath the engine, it's done. Put the oil filter on. Then just right click, rotate the engine again. And let's do the flywheel, clutch plate, clutch pressure plate. And the missed a bolt. Clutch release bearing. Put on the new head on the right side here. And the 3 bolts holding it in place. And let's go ahead and put in the push rods. Well, I guess I can't put in the push rods yet. Okay. Do the exhaust manifold then. And 8 new spark plugs. Because we didn't write down which ones were bad. Okay, that side is basically done. Fuel filter we could replace, sure. Head on this side. I probably need the intake on first before we can put in the push rods. Put on the intake. push rods, right? No, we can't yet. Huh. Oh, duh. Camshaft. Now we can do the push rods. Well, I'm already doing the timing, so I might as well finish that up. Alright. Now let's do these push rods. What I like to do with push rods, I just kind of center my view on the middle of the cylinder, engine head, and just don't change my mechanic's view. Just click across, press enter as soon as the push rod comes up, and it slaps in the new push rod. Then we'll put on the rockers. And again, we don't have to remember which rocker was a reasonable rocker of the position, because we just bought enough to replace all the rockers. Alright, the rockers are on. Put on the engine head cover. Alright, that side's done. Let's swing around and do the same on the other side. Push rods. Alright, push rods on. Put the rod caps on. Alright, rocker arms are on. Put the engine head cover on. And the exhaust manifold. And we'll swing down here, get these spark plugs on. And again, we didn't have to remember which cylinder had a bad spark plug because we just bought enough to replace all of them. Alright, that's good. Let's put the lightning whirler on. And the new rotor. And a new rotor cap, or ignition distributor cap. Now, here's a tip. Ignition distributor caps are held on with clips. They're easy to miss and forget. So the minute I do that, I always look for those two clips. You're going to just drive yourself insane, wondering why a car was at 98% and we're just missing two clips. All right, ignition wires are on. Put on the carb. Slap that down tight. Air filter base, the nice new air filter, and the air filter cap, and the 1 bolt, or wing nut probably. Alright, let's do the water pump on the front. And we've got a couple of holding arms that we got to put in place. The alternator, which we had already replaced prior to testing on this car. Some idler rollers. The other arm that's holding on to the power steering pump. Couple of idler rollers. Water pump pulley. Crankshaft pulley. And we can put on the new serpentine belt that we had already purchased at the start of this job. And the one idler roller. It's holding the belt in place. And the fan. Alright, we have done basically an almost full rebuild on this engine. Not quite 100%, but it is way better than what this customer brought in for us. So let's take the engine off the stand, come back to your van, go to your cherry picker, right, or click on it, install the engine, move back, and then let's check our car status. So we have basically addressed most of the issues on this vehicle in the engine compartment. We know that. So probably all that's left now is suspension related issues. So, or brakes. And really, that's all we got left. Let's go ahead and put some oil in this bad boy before we forget that. Oil's in. Did we have to switch the fluids or just, yep, they wanted us to change it. So let's get to our drain tool. Drain the power steering. Drain the coolant. And where is the brake master cylinder? There it is. Let's drain the brake fluid. Okay, let's go to part unmount, unmount the caps, put in new brake fluid. Okay, brake fluid's replaced. Put in the coolant. I don't think we checked the fuse box now that I'm thinking about it in examine mode. We could examine the fuses, see if there's any fuses that were bad. Oh, no, wait, we did an electronics test, so fuses have been checked. We're good. Power steering fluid. All right, so we're knocking this van down here. All right, let's pop this bad boy up in the air. Let's get the rear suspension system addressed. And the way to do this, especially with how many parts are broken, I would just start ripping the suspension off, find the bad parts, and go from there. So as far as parts that we could get rid of and sell, all of these engine parts that we had pulled, we can get rid of. Except for the starter. So I'm just going to get rid of that so our inventory of parts just is a little bit less out of whack. Just thinking of something here. Exhaust parts we're going to keep. The drive shaft parts we're keeping. All right. Just that way our parts list looks a little cleaner. Pull the brake system off here. Rusted bolt on that caliper. Brake pad. Pull the brake disc. Now we have a brake lathe. So that brake disc, I don't think was one of the parts that was broken. In fact, it's saying it's fine. However, it's free to use the brake lathe. So even though that's a 60% brake, I'm going to go ahead and lathe up his brakes for him. Partially to show you guys how to use the brake lathe. Really easy to use. And two, why not? It doesn't cost us anything. So customers, when you're doing brake jobs, you got disc brakes, I'm going to lathe up your brakes and that restores them to 100% for no fees to us. Whereas you do a repair of a part, you still have to pay for it. All right, that side is pulled off. Let's address this side. That wheel's off, same setup. We'll do the brake caliper, grab the brake pad. These pads look bad. We know these hubcaps, or those hubs are bad, so we got to replace those. The shock off. Shock was bad. These U-bolts are terrible. So are the leaf springs. This thing must just ride like a, you know, it must jump all over the place. Terrible ride. But we'll get her back to a pimp van here pretty quick. All right. Those bushings are out and the leaf springs are out. This looks fine. And we already examined it. It's yellow. The exhaust looks fine, so we don't have to pull those parts. So let's go over here. Take our nice new 100% brake disc from using the lathe. So let's lathe up the other one. And again, this doesn't cost you anything to lathe the brakes. You might as well. Is there any parts here that we could repair that we need to repair? No. So we're not doing that. Let's look at our parts list, sort by condition again, so we have all the red parts here. Add the parts that are bad to our shopping list. Grab that brake off the lathe. I think we lathed all the brakes, excuse me. Let's go to our tablet, car shop, 4 small rubber bushings. Purchase. 4 U-bolts, 2 leaf springs, 2 rear axle knuckle housing Cs. That's a mouthful. A couple of brake pads for the rear, and 2 shock absorber Bs. This should address the rear suspension system and satisfy this part of the order. There's still some parts undiscovered, whole page of parts. Part mount. There we go. Put on the nice new brake. And a new brake pad for you. Calipers, you were happy with 58% calipers, so am I. Put the wheel back on. Leaf spring. And the leaf spring plates with brand new U-bolts. Okay, get that rear shock absorber on. And then the 2 small rubber bushings that go into the leaf spring ends there. So that side of the suspension system on the rear of the van is done. Let's go to the driver's side and do the same. New knuckle housing, wheel hub, the drive axle, leaf spring plate, the nice new U-bolts. Now there's 2 bolts on the U-bolt, so you could get underneath here close to see those bolts if you wish. I've kind of gotten used to where they're at, so I just click, click, and then I can hear it, and I know I've attached those bolts. Grab the new shock absorber and the small rubber bushings on the end of the leaf springs. There we go. Put on a nice new brake disc, brake pads, brake caliper cylinder, and brake caliper, and then throw the old wheel back on. Okay, now let's click on this trans. Let's put the trans back on. Let's put the starter on. The front exhaust sections that we had to remove temporarily to be able to pull the engine out of the car. And then the drive shaft. 4 bolts on the front and the rear, just to remember. All right, so that is addressed. Let's pull the passenger side wheel and address the passenger side suspension system. That wheel is off. Ooh, that's a bad brake disc. Now here is an issue I just thought of. Let's go ahead and put that bad brake pad back on. There's a reason I'm doing this. Because I still have an inventory of all these crap parts. Let's just go ahead and sell them. So sell everything below condition 30. Yep. And the reason I did that is so that as I pull these bad parts off the front suspension system, it'll be easy to identify which parts were the red parts that I want to put on my shopping list to replace. That's it. Pull those bearings. There we go. WD-40 on that spot there. Actually, I don't think we have to take this off. So I can go ahead and put that back on. That looks like it's in fine shape. This shock looks bad. I'm going to pull the shock. Well, maybe I'll pull the shock. Helps to have it in the part unmount phase. Get this link off here. Just to be on the safe side, knowing that these rubber bushings are always end up being bad, I'm going to pull these rubber bushings out of the cross member. Maybe they'll be good, maybe they'll be bad, I don't know. But they tend to be notorious for creating problems. Pull that off. Let's pop this wheel on the driver's side. Spray a little juice on that rusted bolt. Oh boy, the brakes on this side look terrible too. That brake caliper off, brake pad, disc. Let's go ahead and pull the bearings on this side too, see if the bearings are bad. They look bad. Okay. That bearing there. And let's pull the sway bar. Okay. Now let's check our car status. Have we identified all the parts? We have not. There's still some parts that are not identified. Wheel hub bearings. And hey, look at that. 2 rubber bushings that were bad. I kind of had a feeling those rubber bushings were going to be bad. So I think, just to be on the safe side, these are parts we have not yet looked at. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If we go to examine mode, if you look at the the bushings on the upper and lower front suspension arms, they're not identified, meaning we haven't looked at them yet. We haven't tested them, we haven't had a way to look at them. Those, for whatever reason, on any of our suspension diagnostics don't get picked up. So to identify those bushings, just pull the upper and lower suspension arms. And then I'm going to go to my car status. That must have been some of them. Yep, now we have more rubber bushings on our list. Let's get the upper ones too. Alright, let's grab the upper suspension arm on the front here. Just have a feeling these bushings are going to be bad too. Alright, we got a lot of rubber bushings that look red. And we have identified every part. So it was those rubber bushings that were in the suspension arms that were bad. So if we go to our parts list, sort by condition that are bad. I think they were fine with the shock absorbers, weren't they? Let's see. Yeah, we don't have to replace the shock absorbers. No, wait, front springs. All right, so they don't like the springs. All right, so we do have to get springs. So to get to just the front springs, separate the parts on our spring compressing tool. All right, they're separated. And let's head over to our lathe. We can't. Because the vented disc brakes are not repairable. If this was above 10%, we could have taken care of those vented disc brakes and not have to buy them. That's too bad. Is there any parts here that I want to repair? No. Alright, so let's start making a shopping list. We'll right click on these red parts. Now the issue with bushings in particular is that we have some rubber bushings here that are in the yellow. You'd have to put those in the same position, so it's just irritating to me. So I'm just going to add all the rubber bushings to our shopping list, so we don't have to deal with remembering where there were yellow ones and where there were not yellow ones. Okay, go to the shopping store. Wheel hub bearings, we need 2. We're going to buy 12 rubber bushings, which I think I had some already, right? I have 2, so I just need to buy 10. 10. 2 brake pads. 2 vented disc brakes. 2 front springs. And the front sway bar B. Alright, now to save. To put those springs together, you have to join those parts together. So you got your double wishbone shock absorber, your front spring, and the absorber cap. Take them off. Same thing. Join those together. Then we can go over here and we can start mounting our parts back in. Nice new vented disc brake, new bearings, new brake pads. We're using the old hubcaps. Put the upper suspension arm on, and both will have 100% bushings. Put the lower suspension arm on, 100% bushings. Assemble our new front wishbone shock absorber with a new spring. Rubber bushings in the cross members. Put the sway bar on. And the link. And then we'll swing around and attach the wheel. Okay, wheels on. Swing to this side. Put the rubber bushings in the cross member. And again, I just put 100% ones there, so I didn't have to remember where I may have had a yellow bushing that we could have saved. Lower suspension arm. Upper suspension arm. Put on the shock absorber. The end link. Then we can do the brakes on this side. Vented disc brake. Brake pad. Put the caliper back on. Caliper cylinder. A couple of bolts. Put on the bearing. Cap. And the wheel. 5 bolts. There we go. Then check our car status. And all 8 pages of broken parts have been fixed. We have changed and put in the oil, and we have changed all the fluids. So we are good to go. Finish order. There we go. And we leveled up to 16. Does that give us enough to buy the next? It does. We got Renovator 5 unlocked. All right, we're almost to the point where we can repair body panels, so that's excellent. We're at 21,000 $2,798 right now. All we have left in our inventory is a bunch of crappy rubber bushings. Let's just sell all of them. There. Rubber bushings are sold, so we're a little over 21,852 now. All right, so that was a fun mission. We have engine stand. We learned how to use it. We learned how to use the brake lathe. Helpful tips: make sure if you're replacing some spark plugs and you don't remember the number, replace them all as 100%. Same for rod caps and piston rings. Just replace all of them. Push rods and lifters, just replace them all if you have to replace like 4. That's going to save you so much headache going forward. As far as a preview for our next one, it's a 2000 Hint Ata Kagura SX. It's a Subaru. Again, they didn't pay for the name. That's fine. But that'll be our next story car and our next guide video in the series. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This one's longer, but that was a complicated van. So that one's going to be one that you guys are going to have to spend some time on. But it's a fun rebuild, I think. Hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one. Lucas Isaac Parker, hope you liked it.